Hi there, it's me. Now, I know the channel's been really quiet for quite a long time, but yeah, here I am, late as usual, and 6 days later than I wanted to get this episode review out and done, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. But yep, I'm back. I'm going to be reviewing season 7.2 or 7B, whatever you want to call it, of Outlander. So yeah, let's get on with the show. Outlander is the drama show about the extended Fraser and Mackenzie families, who can time travel and... Wait, you know all this? I mean, this is part 2 of season 7. I mean, if you've not been watching Outlander until now, I'm not sure why you're watching this video, but I've literally reviewed every episode of this show. So there's a playlist. If you really want to know what I thought about everything, hit that and buckle up if you fancy it. But otherwise, let's get on with season 7, part 2. Episode 709, Unfinished Business, starts out with Jamie, Claire and wee Ian delivering the body of Jamie's recently deceased cousin back to Scotland so he can be buried in his native soil. And after the funeral they all descend on Lallybroch, where Jenny apparently comes out to meet them, and they do hugs and stuff, and as do wee Ian's twin brothers who have a bad hair dye job. And then there's old Ian, and he's not doing too well. He's got the consumption, so he has, and he likely won't last out the year, which is kind of a shame. And this gets Big Jim thinking, he ought to make some amends, so he rides off to see wee Leary, who still hasn't aged much since season 1, and seems to be shacked up with some kind of mentally challenged gardener type. And Jamie's all about to be like, I'm sorry hen, but she's having none of it, and it gets pretty heated, leading to Jamie having to lay the smackdown on the mentally challenged guy, which is really heroic in that. King of Men and all that, Jamie, eh? Anyway, he realises that the problem is that Leary can't get married without being thrown off her land because it's technically his land and she loses rights to it if, she becomes married to another person because the law. And luckily, a Ned Gowan skeleton is still alive somewhere, so Jamie sorts it out with a writ and a signature and it's all good. And that means, Leary can get married and our wee ginger kid can join a nunnery, which is probably the best thing for her, being a soulless demonic ginger. While that's going on, Claire gets a letter that some random cousin of Lord John got shot up bad in his tummy and only Claire can fix him using future surgery or something. And she's all about, well, I've got to stay here with Big Ian until Jenny says, no, go away, be sensible. So Claire decides to head to America. And meanwhile, wee Ian's deciding to let Rachel go because, he really wants to stay there with Big Ian until Jenny says, no, go away, be sensible. So Ian decides to head back to America with Claire. Although Jamie's going to hang about for reasons. But else meanwhile where Team Buck Rogers have landed in the past, and we find out that Buck's actually got a dodgy ticker. And despite this, Rogers decides it's probably a good idea for the Reach to go off in their own direction, so he heads off to Lallybroch to ask Jenny and Ian for help. But when he gets there, turns out Jenny's still only a teenager, and her dad Brian is still alive. Uh-oh, Rogers in the wrong timeline. But luckily Daddy Brian's a really nice guy, so offers to help, and they get a lead on a strange man, who's probably the kidnapper. But unfortunately, Buck's in a really bad way because that dodgy ticker that Roger didn't care about. So Roger has to take him to the local herbalist, who turns out to be none other than Gaius, Roger's time-travelling great-great-great-grandma. What a shockaroony. So what did I think? Well, to be honest, there was good and bad this week. But since it's a brand new half season, let's start out with the good stuff. It was lovely to see Lallybroch again. It's in its old style. I mean, it was fun back in season 7 seeing the kind of 1980s version of it, but there's something nice about returning to these old locations and sets that we remember from back in seasons 1 and 2. The same goes for the return to Inverness and seeing Gaelus's house. And heck, we might even be heading back to Leach at some point, which would be pretty fun. Similarly, it's Ian. We all love Ian. And it's Gaius. And it's Leary. And the trailer has already spoiled that Dougal is returning at some point, so yeah, I mean, it's nice to see these familiar faces, and who knows who else is going to pop back up. But yeah, we get these old characters and locations back on screen, and, hey, it's just nice. Let's face it, key jangling works. Nostalgia is basically what things run on these days on TV and film, and, it's more fun than the American forts or the Wilmington streets or the local village or cottage of the week that we've been seeing for the last few seasons in America. And I do have a theory on why we're seeing so much of this stuff, and I'll put that later in the video. Similarly, despite the first moment being a bit uncanny, I actually thought the new Jenny was fine. I mean, I don't know the actress Kristen Atherton from anything else, but she was perfectly good in the role, and what with, Laura Donnelly now being unavailable with becoming a big hit on the West End and being the lead in that cancelled show about Victorian X-Men superheroes, which I didn't see, it makes sense to do a recasting, same as they did with Buck. But yeah, so that was all nice. Nice is what it was. But this was not a great return after 6 months of break away from this show. I mean, it's comfortable, it's fan-friendly. I mean, oh, remember this? Remember this person? No, I mean, that's fine. But what sits kind of badly is the general lack of oomph in this plot, which, again, is kind of the same issue that the show's had since probably season 4 or season 5. I mean, maybe it's that the books it's based on are kind of too big and too sprawling and have a little bit too much soap opera stuff to suit a show that has a limited runtime and a limited episode count in the way that they have for it. And this episode's kind of a classic example of that. I mean, by rights, this should be a really tear-jerking and meaningful episode, but it kind of isn't, because everything feels far too rushed. I mean, there's some nice scenes, don't get me wrong. I mean, yeah, I really liked the scene with Ian and wee Ian. I mean, that was kind of sweet. But again, it felt really short. It was truncated, and then it was resolved a few minutes later. I mean, similarly, Claire's dilemma with Henry. I mean, nice idea, but a bit too short. And again, it was all resolved a few minutes later. I mean, it feels like literally they've just arrived here at Lallybroch and they're back out the door again because the show has to get on with it. You know, we've got to keep it moving. I mean, earlier seasons, or in a better show, you feel like all this might have been a B-plot and they would have stretched it over 2 or 3 episodes, let it sit in your head for a bit, let you think about it for a week or two. But similarly, scenes like Jamie and Leary's argument, or the bit about, like, the nun Ginger, I mean, that stuff dragged a little because it was less interesting. I mean, I don't care much about these people. I mean, not when the show throws it all in and then resolves everything literally a couple of minutes later. No, there's no time to think about this stuff. And timing's a serious problem in a show like this. One of the great examples this week is the weird thing with the knock on the door. Now, it's not the first time that I've ever seen this used. I mean, famously, they do this exact same switcheroo in Silence of the Lambs, and it's brilliant. But here, the timing's all off. I mean, it takes so long for anybody to get up and go to the door. It feels like it's going on forever. And I know it's a big house, but that's just kind of crazy. I mean, especially when, look, in the same episode, you've got Galis arriving at the door a split second after it gets knocked on. Similarly, you've got the Buck Rogers plot. I mean, a literal kidnapping rescue plot, which should be the A plot of this episode. But it feels like that gets sidelined in favour of this legal divorce nonsense. I mean, more than that, we've actually got Roger meeting Jenny, which was a bit strange because I actually don't remember. Does he actually know Jenny? Has he met Jenny? I mean, I'm willing to believe that he has, and I've just literally forgotten it. But in all the comings and goings, I really don't recall that. So the fact that he just sits and stares at her seems a little bit over the top, because he also, you know, by all rights, should know Brian about as well as he knows Jenny. He's just a name of a person that he's heard of. Also, Brian is completely chill to basically a random guy who stands perving over his daughter for a minute or two. I mean, then saying, it's fine, mate, you know, I'm married, don't worry about it. I'm totally not going to try and seduce her while I'm here or sneak into her room while you're all asleep, wink wink. But then also there's like this weird voiceover of him sat drinking at Lallybroch. I mean, again, they just kind of left him drinking alone. I mean, what if he was about to run off with the silverware? And that's a choice. Like, especially the voiceover. The voiceover what we've got at the beginning with Jamie, that's fine, you know, we've got Claire and Jamie voiceovers for plenty in the show. We've got, like, the letters left behind, so maybe it's supposed to be from the letter. That's all fine. But Roger's literal in-the-moment narration of what's happening, that's something new. We've never had that in the show before. And it feels kind of weird and off-putting. It feels a little cheesy. But again, this is all just the same problems that we've had in the show for a while by this point. And again, it's why I think viewing figures are kind of through the floor in this show compared to how much it was a growing fan base during seasons 1 to 3. But on a different note, I did say earlier I had this theory about the show returning to so many old sets and tossing in Brian and young Jenny and Gaius and Dougal. And I'm also betting returning to some of the season 1 and 2 sets is part of a different reason. And that's because, as we know, Roger's trip is, I mean, it's from the book, but also there's the upcoming spin-off show, Blood of My Blood, and we know that that's a spin-off prequel, and it's going to be partly about young Brian and his wife. Now, it's also apparently going to be about Claire's mum and dad and their romance during World War I. And I would not be surprised if some or any or all of these people also turn out to be time travelers because, I mean, that's kind of part of the whole point of the TV show. I mean, maybe not, but I would be very surprised if they didn't toss some of that in there somewhere. And I reckon that some of the reason they're using these old sets is because, well, as you've probably guessed where I'm going, they're probably going to reuse some of them in the spin-off show. There's probably going to be stuff in Lallybroch and Laoch. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if they filmed this season at the same time as they filmed Blood of My Blood, or if it was only during the next season, or they filmed them differently, but it makes sense to pull all these sets out of like storage, blow the dust off them, and then use them again. I mean, it also means we might get some of the lot of samey season 1 stuff popping up this season and in the show. I mean, as we said, some people are returning. But we'll see. I mean, we'll especially see if I bother to review Blood of My Blood. I'm not sure yet if I'm going to, but we'll see. On the other hand, what's actually happening now? You know, we've got Jamie at home, and because trailers are basically the devil's own poop, I've already seen that Jamie's going to get into some trouble and Claire's going to get some bad news about him while she's back in Yankee Land. And that Henry guy is probably going to be 100% fine, despite the fact it would have taken anywhere between 3 to 6 months for him to get injured, and then for Lord John to find out, and then write a letter, and the letter to get to Scotland, and Claire to get the letter, and then decide she's going back, and then take the boat back, and then get to wherever on earth it is in America she has to get to. And, I mean, it seems slightly bonkers. I mean, it can't be that bad an injury if that's the case. I mean, if it's, oh, he's got a ball inside him and it might take him a year or two to die, sure. If it's, oh no, he's really struggling, she's going to get back and find a corpse. But then again, don't think about that, because this is TV shows made in the 2020s, whereas if we've learned anything from Game of Thrones and the like, everybody has a fast travel ability and can just skip from place to place without the show worrying about it. That's now the law. And as I said earlier, I'm way more interested in Roger's story at this point. I mean, best case, this could be a kind of Back to the Future sort of shenanigan with Roger and Buck trying to get Jamie back while not changing the past, even though we know, because the show has made it very clear, you can't change the past. But yeah, it could be like, back off to America with Claire and Ian to finish the Archie Bug plot and to keep Claire busy shouting at people and doing surgery while Jamie gets into bother elsewhere. And I'm guessing Buck and Roger will end up in America as well, because clearly Diana Gabaldon prefers writing about US history, and that makes sense, I suppose, also considering that the entire writing team of this show are America-based, and most of them are Americans. So, yeah. I mean, at this stage, I'm just going to admit, I'm watching this and I'm reviewing it because I've already watched and reviewed 7.5 seasons of it. There are a lot of better shows out there at the moment. You're probably watching some yourself. I'm going to actually put together a wee video recommending some shows I've seen over the last few years that are actually better than this. But that's it from this week's Outlander, and until next time, these have been my grumpy opinions.